Hi, friends. I just wanted to take a few minutes to address Theodore Kaczynski's incredibly dumb updated manifesto, which is called The Industrial Society and Its Future. This is the 1995 update to his previous manifesto. Okay? So, on an earlier premiere, I was talking about this nonsense a little bit, and Fiaco came in and said, "Oh, I agree with Corey on this." Let me explain why this is garbage. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. A huge claim, and let's see what kind of substantiation it comes with. They have greatly increased the life expectancy of those of us who live in advanced countries, but they have destabilized society, have made life unfulfilling, have subjected human beings to indignities, had led to widespread psychological suffering in the third world, and physical suffering as well, and have inflicted severe damage on the actual war. Okay, so let's look at this sequence of unsubstantiated claims and unlinked claims. So they've greatly increased life expectancy. In other words, yeah, life quality and quantity of life have both increased dramatically in most countries since the onset of the Industrial Revolution. It says here, they've destabilized society. So, again, he's attributing these various claims as caused by the Industrial Revolution and its consequences. Well, that's true that during the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, society was bogged down in a pre-Enlightenment dogma that prevented humanity from advancing at all. And apparently, Mr. Kacynski thinks that that was a good life in which there was, because it was not destabilized at all, must have been fulfilling, I guess. Well, being a mud farmer in the Middle Ages, disease, everything bad, dead at 28. Yeah, that would have been fantastic. It's led to widespread psychological suffering, and in the third world, physical suffering as well. Well, I mean, does living in an economically viable society in which people are empowered to use their good ideas and increasing capacity to build off the good ideas of people who came before them to enable more stuff like this, critiquing this nonsense. They claims that it made life unfulfilling. For whom exactly? He's talking about himself, right? He finds life unfulfilling. Has subjected human beings to indignities. Well, human beings have subjected other human beings to indignities in the name of profit. That has happened plenty of times. And humanity continues to grow in those areas and expect more responsible treatment of employees and stuff, or at least disallow irresponsible examples of workplaces. So, he right off the bat, you can already throw this guy's crap away, right? The only thing here that has legitimate linkage is that, yes, industrialization has caused severe damage to the natural world. Population explosion has caused severe damage to the natural world. The continued development of technology will worsen the situation. Well, so let's say this. Let's say somebody comes up with a cheap and easy carbon sequestration technology that allows us to deal with the excess carbon in the atmosphere once it's outside of the manufacturing facilities, and that thereby we're able to solve climate change without handicapping the engine of our prosperity, namely economic activity. The reason economic activity is the engine of our prosperity is because it is only by doing useful things for others in our own interests that we create more new wealth in the world. prevented so many people from doing meaningful work for that period of time. The federal government didn't change their what do you call that? Quantitative easing. It didn't change their quantitative easing policies, which infused a certain amount of currency into the economy at a steady rate, and accordingly, all that currency wasn't there to account for actual new wealth that had been generated, but was accounting for wealth that had not been generated, and inflation is nature's way of adjusting that, right? So the thing to remember is what I'm explaining here are actual explanations about how the world works, how things happen, etc. What he's doing here is making a bunch of claims about the most negative interpretation of things is this, therefore this is true. I mean, I could say the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a spectacular success for the human race. They have greatly increased the life expectancy of those of us who live in an advanced country, and they have stabilized society such that in almost every Western nation, people can go to work and come home, go do activities and such without worrying about being subjected to violence. This was never the case in the pre-industrial revolution days. Let's go to the next sentence. Have subjected human beings to have freed human beings from indignities, specifically disease, being at the mercy of the elements, famine in most Western countries. The continued development of technology will worsen the situation. Have led to widespread psychological suffering, have led to widespread ontological growth, for individuals, as it's empowered the individual to be expressive, and I'm being expressive right now by creating such things as OBS and Logi camera that attached to my laptop, and etc. Right? So it definitely could be viewed just as much empowering as it could be as subjecting people to indignities, have led to widespread psychological suffering. We already responded to that one. In the third world, the physical suffering as well. Even in the third world, where we see the worst manifestations of a post-industrial society, industrialization provides a better way of life for any individual who voluntarily includes themselves in the workforce. Because for those people, even if we might view the environment of that workplace, the amount of money they make or whatever, as inadequate to justify all they have to do, they view it as a preferable option to the status quo, to their own status quo. So, thing to remember is it empowers individuals in the third world to have another alternative to what's often a very poor and pre-industrial style of life. It says here, so the continued development of technology will worsen the situation. The continued development of technology will almost certainly provide the solution. As we see, we're past our worst point as a species in terms of polluting, damaging the earth, and increasingly technologies are coming into play that help repair that damage, remove some of that pollution, and accordingly adjust our relationship with the earth so that we have a better and more healthy engagement with nature that's less destructive. new technology empowers that to happen in lots of different ways. It empowers scientists to keep track of the bighorn sheep population in Yosemite, for example, and to spread them around to different mountain ranges in the Sierra Nevada so that when they were almost once hunted to extinction, now there's 13 groups, herds of them in different spots in the Sierra Nevada. They do that with helicopters and various other things. Now, Ted Kacynski might say, well, if we just got rid of all the human stuff, then the animals would be fine. Well, okay. That's maybe true, but anyway, the point is we want to protect human beings as best we can from the chaos of pre-industrial life. The industrial technological system, at least he says here, will certainly subject human beings to greater indignities and inflict greater damage on the natural world. I mean, you can't stop the development of technology without imposing on each individual human being by force that you must not act upon your good idea. The technological industrial system may survive or may break down. If it survives, it may eventually achieve a low level of physical and psychological suffering, but only after passing through a long and very painful period of adjustment, and only the cost of permanently reducing human beings and many other living organisms to engineered products and mere cogs of the social machine. This is totally unsubstantiated garbage, right? So the industrial technological system is not a system, right? It's the naturally occurring phenomenon when you allow individuals to pursue their own interests, to make the best of their ideas or other good ideas that people present to them or whatever, and to personally profit by being useful to other people in accordance with those good ideas. That's what's going to happen naturally if you're not using violence to prevent it from happening. The government regulates, to some extent, the free enterprise between individuals in order to sustain a fair marketplace across the board. It appropriately takes some measures. In other instances, in order to create artificial monopolies, it does the opposite. So, the thing is, nobody should have any, at this point, nobody should have any faith in what this guy's doing at all, because he's just making these claims without actually evaluating the nuanced reality that we have. Some things about technology are destabilizing. Most of the things about technology, frankly, that I think of technology as, are stabilizing. They give people entertainment, things to do. They enable people who might be physically isolated from others to engage with other people via video conference and stuff. They enabled Rachel's family to see our wedding, and it was great and everything. So the idea that the system can't survive without permanently reducing human beings and many other living organisms to engineered products and mere cogs in the social machine. Again, this industrial technological system can't do things to people in the way that human beings can do things to people. This is just metaphor, and the idea that because people have to work to support themselves most of the time, that they've been reduced to engineered products and mere cogs in the social machine is insane. I mean, the most advanced countries, the ones with the most technology, tend to also be the most free countries that are the most empowering to individuals to allow them to do what they want. Of course, if they're going to do whatever they want, they're going to require others to be useful to them. In exchange, they're going to have to be useful to others to make money, which then is the fungible form of wealth. So there's this creation of this monolithic force of societal forces moving forward inevitably or even probably or whatever. It just, the lack of actual justifications are ridiculous. And as you heard, I could make the same exact sentences the other direction, but and actually substantiate them with examples, for example, and be more convincing than he is on every single point he makes, even, except for this one, that the Industrial Revolution and the time thereafter has inflicted severe damage on the natural world. But as I pointed out, we're past our most damaging spot in there. So, like, just my basic talking about it, right? I give you much better reasons to believe my one-sided positioning of it in response to his. Now, I wouldn't actually respond to him in the sense that I want to speak the actual truth about things, not just negate everything he says with an equivalent thing from the opposite side, just better substantiated. I'm not interested in just rebutting with what he's saying, because what I'm interested in doing is pointing out that he's not saying anything that you should take seriously. If the system breaks down, the consequences will be very painful. But the bigger the system grows, the more disastrous the results of the breakdown will be. So if it is to break down, it best break down sooner rather than later. No substantiation for this claim whatsoever. First of all, there's this system that he talks about. There is some sort of dynamic system of multiple sources of wealth and power and interests and voices and so forth interacting in a stew of connected but independent interactions, right? But that's the notion that it's all one system that will either completely fall apart or completely stay together is ridiculous. It's self-adapting in the sense that if there's some element within the larger system that's causing this rest of it to not work properly, it's very plausible for the system to jettison this part and rearrange and work properly without it, because it's become toxic in some fashion. Meaning it no longer operates according to the frame, within the frame and according to the rules of the frame that it's supposed to be operating under. Okay, now, then he proceeds to attack leftism, and does such a terrible job of it. Almost everyone will agree that we live in a deeply troubled society. Really? I mean, that's probably always been true for all of human history. We live in a society now that's unprecedented. We're not sure what's going to happen with all this change. It's happening so rapidly. But, I know that we all enjoy getting up and going into the kitchen, turning on the lights and getting food out of the fridge more than we would eating dried hyena meat from a stick, huddled in the dirt with some bugs. But what is leftism? Well, his answer to the question is, two psychological tendencies underlie modern leftism, what we call feelings of inferiority and over-socialization. Right. Now, while he certainly acknowledges that he by no means claims to be telling the whole truth about leftist psychology, then he proceeds to say the two psychological tendencies that underlie modern left are feelings of inferiority and over-socialization. Feelings of inferiority are characteristic of left as a whole, while over-socialization is characteristic only of a certain segment of modern leftism. This segment is highly influential. By feelings of inferiority, we mean not only inferiority feelings in the strict sense, but a whole spectrum of related traits: low self-esteem, feelings of powerlessness, depressive tendencies, defeatism, guilt, self-hatred, etc. Okay, this is just completely contrafactual nonsense. You could be very much a leftist and have none of those traits. Low self-esteem, feelings of powerlessness, depressive tendencies, defeatism, guilt, self-hatred, etc. We argue, who's we, Ted, that modern leftists tend to have some such feelings, possibly more or less repressed, and those feelings are decisively determining the direction of modern leftism. So you're acknowledging above that you're not giving the whole of the psychology, but you are claiming below right here that your argument is determinate regarding everything you need to know about them. So it is, of course, very likely that feelings are involved for just about every person when they make, say, political decisions or position themselves politically. Clearly, this guy's emotional position is he does not like lefties, right? He's one of those damn lefties, right? Any stuff like that, you just immediately dismiss the person because that's their agenda there, is to exact their emotional on this made up monolithic group of people who he invalidates with these unwarranted attacks and clearly that's the whole point of this thing, is to blame, to have somebody to blame and to blame them. So when someone interprets as derogatory anything that is said about him or about groups with whom he identifies, we conclude that he has inferiority feelings or low self-esteem. This tendency is pronounced among minority rights activists, whether or not they belong to minority groups whose rights they defend. And they're hypersensitive about words used to designate minorities or about anything that is said concerning minorities. Okay, well, alright, then he complains about just too much cultural sensitivity, political correctness, and stuff like that, right? Look, I'm not disagreeing with him probably on those specific points that we should, well, at least on this one down here, that when we talk about the savages, in other words, pre-industrial people, we should call them savages. Because, and then he proceeds to say, we do not mean to, they seem almost paranoid about anything that might suggest that any primitive culture is inferior to ours. We do not mean to imply that primitive cultures are inferior to ours. We merely point out the hypersensitivity of left anthropologists. Okay, but they are inferior to ours. They definitely are. That's why I'm able to make this video talking shit about your bullshit. And they aren't. They have to sit in the dirt with bugs. Savages that's not a good way to live. The Native Americans, they're like, we're First Nation people. There was no nation. You savages, you were just living in teepees, following animals around, getting all dusty all the time. That's not how you do things. Agriculture. Fucking till the land, plant some seeds. You want to follow animals around like a pack of dogs. Of course they're inferior. Why? They're pre-industrial. Obviously, my life is way more badass your life, no matter how shitty it is a zillion times more badass than someone in the Middle Ages. Right? We definitely have a much better life. Just because Ted Kaczynski's mad and desperate to find somebody to blame other than himself, there's, yeah, he's horrible. Leftists tend to hate anything that has an image of being strong, good, and successful. They hate America. They hate Western civilization. They hate white males. They hate rationality. I mean, that's not true. Those are just totally unwarranted statements. I agree. Leftists tend to be a little bit less rah-rah with the flag than people more far right around the spectrum, I guess you'd say. I don't really like to even use those terms. You've just got one group of people who's engaging politically wrong. That group includes Ted Kaczynski. And it doesn't really matter which arbitrary side they are being wrong about. But you can explain why people are wrong in certain ways and not about certain other things with cognitive functions. Like, this is all NI. There is zero SI involved in this. Probably an INTJ. But it's, you know, he doesn't substantiate anything with anything. Leftist is not typically the kind of person whose feelings of inferiority make him a braggart and egotist to bully, self-promote, or ruthless competitor. This kind of person has not wholly lost faith in himself. He has a deficit in his sense of power and self-worth, but he can still conceive of himself as having the capacity to be strong. His efforts to make himself strong produce his unpleasant behavior. And then he has a footnote, the one. What could he possibly be footnoting? So the point is, one. Let me find the footnote. We are asserting that all, or even most bullied and ruthless competitors suffer from feelings of inferiority. So, even people on the right, during the return period, many over-socialized people suffer from serious psychological problems as a result of repressing and trying to repress their sexual feelings. Today, the focus of socialization is shifted from sex to aggression. Well, I mean, yeah, we shouldn't. Aggression is a rights violation. This guy's an INTJ. These footnotes aren't footnotes. They're not referencing anything. They're not citations. They're just his making another bald, unsubstantiated claim. This is a very convoluted link story to explain how the left's feelings of inferiority cause them to be kind of authoritarian in their meows. And technophiles are taking us all on an utterly reckless ride into the unknown. Many people understand something of what technological progress is doing to us, yet take a passive attitude toward it because they think it is inevitable. The technophiles are a bunch of different individual parties and enterprises, often competing against each other, to provide products that people want to buy. Now, who's responsible then if it turns out that providing products that people want to buy, like 3D printers, which Jeffrey has one, if in fact they're taking an utterly reckless ride into the unknown, then aren't, in fact, the people who purchase their products the ones taking us on an utterly reckless ride into the unknown? Are individuals who come up with new ideas? Is your perspective that there should be some enforcement agency to compel people to not continue to technologically advance, to just not learn from what previous good thinkers have created already? This is just such pure, absolute, completely nonsense, garbage, every bit of the way. And the reason you should know it's garbage is because there is no SI. There are no examples for anything. There is no honest assessment of the status quo. There are a bunch of claims that generalize how this guy feels about stuff, such as over-socialization. Well, he's probably apipolar, and he feels as though socializing is somehow a dangerous and disrespectful thing to do, as I feel like his NIing his FI into universal truths about reality, without any good cause or substantiation. And in other words, to treat a presentation about his feelings about things as though there were an explanation about things. It's reprehensible. It's nothing of the sort. This guy is just, look at this thing here. Some people take the line that modern man has too much power, too much control over nature. They argue for a more passive attitude on the part of the human race. At best, these people are expressing themselves unclearly because they fail to distinguish between power for large organizations and power for individuals and small groups. It is a mistake to argue for powerlessness and passivity because if people need power, modern man as a collective entity, that is the industrial system has immense power over nature, and we, FC, regard this as evil. Right. Kacynski. But modern individuals and small groups of individuals have far less power than primitive men ever did. I mean, simply not true. Because it says here, generally speaking, the vast power of modern man over nature exercised by individuals not exercised by individuals or small groups, but by large organizations. Except for those large organizations put in things like roads, which empower modern individuals to travel long distances in short periods of time that would have required the individuals in small groups in primitive cultures to have exerted, weeks of their life to make the same trip on foot. So it says here, to the extent that the average modern individual can wield the power of technology, is permitted to do so only within narrow limits and only under the supervision and control of the system. The system that you keep making up this thing called the system, there is no monolithic system. The way that people interface with the world is through a multiplicity of different channels, means, modalities, with more or less communication with other people, more or less interface with just straight up databases, etc. There's a huge amount of variety in how individuals engage with their own power over nature. It is true that if you're a very small population of people and you're primitives, that you individually can decide to chop down these 3 trees right here, and probably it's not going to cause any big deal, right? That's assuming there's no property. Well, I got a chainsaw, man. I got this little wilderness car. I could cut up some logs, put shit in the back of that little wilderness car, and get so much more trees chopped down in one day than primitive people could in months. So you have to, it's like he's making these distinctions that just don't stand up to any looking at them at all. Instead of arguing for powerlessness and passivity, one should argue the power of the industrial system should be broken and that this will greatly increase the power and freedom of individuals and small groups. Well, you've yet to explain what this industrial system is. You just assume that we all understand that your metaphor isn't a metaphor because you're talking about something, right? It's ridiculous. The destruction of the system must be the revolutionary's only goal. Well, I mean, how would you know it's destroyed? When we have anarchy, riots in the streets, etc.? It's ridiculous. It would be hopeless. Meanwhile, it's also hypocritical. It would be hopeless for revolutionaries to try to attack systems without using some modern technology. If nothing else, they must use the communication media to spread their message that they should use modern technology for only one purpose: to attack the technological system. Okay, so I'm not doing it for that purpose. I'm using media for another purpose. Are you saying that I'm engaged in some moral wrongdoing? Are you saying that I'm simply wrong in my position on things? Are you saying that I have a positive obligation to behave as you indicate here if I want to be a good person or a proper revolutionary? I mean, let's say you did damage the system. How much would you continue to use modern technology to damage the system before you thought it was broken enough that you would there, presumably after abandoning technology that now has gotten you into power? The idea that this isn't just Ted Kacynski should be dictator of the world, ultimately under that is underlying this is indisputable, because he may say all this stuff about empowering individuals and small groups, but any mechanism to actually implement this shit would be insane, right? You couldn't legitimately engage in the behavior you're engaging in without taking advantage of the technology that you blame for everything. And in fact, any realistic assessment of reality says that technology has both good and bad effects, and that's about all there is to say about it, right? As far as this depiction of the left as this monolithic group of individuals who all share some kind of pathology that makes them fundamentally wrong and even evil in some fashion, and it's because they feel inferior. The thing is, it seems to me very much like Ted Kacynski is simply projecting his own FI, NI, putting it out there and saying, here's my warped, undeliberated bullshit. Nobody should give this guy even. Nobody should have gotten past the first paragraph of that already just saying, okay, this guy is fucking just a nut job, because he's just making broad swath claims with no substantiation.